The library was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
Hello. Well, it's nice to be back in my hometown too. I just want to say that I am a son of Toronto, and it's really a pleasure to be here, talking about Susan's book about a man that I think we all know. There's so many things that we wouldn't have if he hadn't been who he was. And before I talk to you, I have so many things. We have so much in common. I've written a book about the kids in the hall who worked with Lorne, and there's a whole bunch of things. There's going to be a lot to talk about.
We didn't get out here because we were just so busy gossiping
backstage.
Actually,
You should have filmed the backstage. It was really, really, that's where the real show happens. But I thought it would be a good idea if you didn't mind, reading something from the book so we get a flavor of what it is. And you've been kind enough to do it.
Yeah, sure. Well, no, thank you, Paul. And it's so nice to see you. It's exciting to be back here on Lorne's home turf. The last time I was here, I was eating poutine with heart pomerantz. And that was 10 years ago, I think. So, I'm just going to read the first page of the book, which kind of gives you a sense of, what my take, my angle of attack is on this great subject. So here we go. Every week at Saturday Night Live is just like every other week. Every week is the same because it's always intense, fueled by insanely hard work, full of triumphs and failures and backstage explosions, and because it's built around a guest host, Jennifer Lopez or Lizzo or Elon Musk, who often has no idea what they are doing. It has been Lorne Michaels' job for the last 50 years to make it seem as if they do, and to corral the egos and the talents on his staff into getting the show on the air live. Since he created the show in 1975, he's periodically tweaked and fine-tuned it, paying attention to how the cultural winds are drifting. But the formula has essentially remained the same. Michaels compares it to a Snickers bar. Viewers expect a certain amount of peanuts, a certain amount of caramel, and a certain amount of chocolate. There's a comfort level, he says. The show has good years and bad years, like the New York Yankees or the Dow, and the audience has come to feel something like ownership of it. Just about every person who has ever watched SNL believes that its funniest years were the ones when they were in high school. Michaels likes to say that everyone in the entertainment business has two jobs, their actual job and figuring out how to fix SNL. When J.D. Salinger died in 2010, letters surfaced in which even he griped about what was wrong with the show. The show's cast members and writers have speculated for years about the secret behind Michaels' extraordinary tenure. It's him and Hitchcock, John Mulaney says. No one else has had this kind of longevity. Half of them believe that Michaels has repeatedly been able to remake the show for a new audience because he's a once-in-a-lifetime talent, a producer non-pariah. The other half wonders whether Michaels' gnomic and almost comically elusive is a blank screen onto which they've all projected a lifetime of hopes and fears and dark jokes, whether he, like the cramped stages in SNL's Studio 8H, is just a backdrop for the ever-shifting brilliance of the country's best comic minds.
Awesome. Again, so many areas to get into here. I do have all these notes, and I kept saying to myself, I just want to talk, but if we run out of areas to go, I've got things to go to. But the first thing I was amazed to learn that this is the first book, because I knew you as a features editor for The New Yorker, right? And you were associated with Spy magazine, which I think is a great legacy to begin with. The people who coined the term short-fingered vulgarian for Donald Trump, they had it nailed early.
We were on to him.
And but this is your first is it your first book?
It's not just my first book, it's the first piece of writing that I've ever done. I've just been an editor for 40 years. And 10 years ago, when I was watching the SNL 40th anniversary show, I was a new empty nester, and I had this crazy idea that suddenly meant I would have a lot of free time, despite my day job. I was watching the show, and I was just not just laughing, but I was kind of moved at thinking that this one guy, this Canadian man born Lorne Lipowitz from Toronto, had been responsible for what has made so many generations of Americans and Canadians, I'm sure, do laugh. And I knew Lorne very briefly because I worked for him in '83 when he did his One Spectacular Failure, the new show. But I also knew, because I made a lot of friends with the writers back then, Steve Martin, Jack Handey, people who've gone on to write for me at The New Yorker. I've been hearing people talk about Lorne Michaels in these hushed, frightened, annoyed tones for 40 years. You know, they compared him to Kim Jong-un, and they compared him to, Jay Gatsby and to Darth Vader, and as you and your family know well, Dr. Evil. He inspired Dr. Evil. So I just decided that somebody, and he'd been hiding in plain sight for 40 years because one of his rules is to staunchly avoid talking to reporters. And I just decided that a book needed to be written about him, and somehow I should be the one. But yeah, anyway, so I can tell you if you want the weird story of how I. Do you want to hear about how?
Nobody wants to hear anything interesting. From
Okay,
you.
No. I mean, I'll tell you.
Especially if it's a weird story.
I'm conscious of going on too long, but so I decided that I would try to write this book, and I did a proposal. I did not promise in the proposal that Lorne would be on board, because I knew if I went to him and asked him, he would just say, "Are you kidding me? No way." But I said in my proposal that I thought there was some likelihood that he would participate because he knew me a little bit. And anyway, so I sold the book. I went to see him in his office, and I said, "Lorne, I just wanted you to know I've just sold a biography about you. I don't need anything from you. You know, I'm familiar with your world, and I know a lot of your people, but it'll be a better and a richer book if you want to participate." And if you know anything about Lorne, or if you've read the book, or if you know any producers, the thing that Lorne hates more than anything in the whole world is surprises. So
Yes.
He looked like he was going to have a coronary. I mean, I was worried.
Oh man.
I was worried that he was going to keel over, he kind of hemmed and hawed, and it was awkward, and he tried to talk me out of it, but it was pleasant enough, and then we agreed to meet a few days later for a drink to talk about it some more. I mean, one of his management modes is deflection. He gets his way by kind of kicking things down the road and not committing, and so I thought that's what was happening here. But then when we did meet for that drink a couple days later, I came in prepared to charm and negotiate, but I sat down, and before he had even ordered his drink, he just started unspooling his remarkable showbiz stories, and he has a lot of them, Milton Berle and Madonna, and
Yes.
and I realized, oh my God, he's in.
He's
and
in.
I hadn't expected this, so I didn't have a tape recorder. I didn't even have a notepad.
Oh my God.
So I kept.
As a writer, I just had a coronary.
I kept excusing myself, going into the ladies' room to scribble things down on a Con Ed bill. But no, he was in. He was all in,
man.
and he didn't ask anything of me, no restrictions. He didn't want to read anything, didn't put any, he trusted me. And then over the next years, I interviewed him about 50 times, and it was really interesting.
And just 50 times, too. Like, okay, but there's so many things there. Let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Yes, I look like Mike Myers because he is, in fact, my brother.
And Lorne.
One of the things about that is not only like I was just saying earlier, like it's like The Godfather. When I met him the first time, I went over and I practically kissed his ring. Thank you for what you've done for my family. And it really, as children of Saturday Night Live, watching Mike get on that show as at the same time that the kids in the hall were getting their own show, who were also friends of mine, it was weird to suddenly be hearing stories from inside the castle, which is 30 Rock.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I remember, several people associated with this, is a quote that, paraphrasing that what they say, Lorne says, which is, when they ask about your private life, never show them how you live. And I don't know how true that is to him actually, but that's what they said. And so when I heard that you not only had access, but that you had 10 years of multiple interviews with him, I thought, who is this Susan Morrison? And I guess what I want to ask you right away is, how did you get to work on the new show, which is the 1984 show after he had left Saturday Night Live for one season? And what were you doing there?
Well, there's a kind of an amazing serendipity to that, and I think it actually is even part of why Lorne did decide to throw in with me. I think he's a little, he's a little sentimental and he's a little superstitious. I had just graduated from college. I had been in graduate school in the UK. I had to move back to the States suddenly because my mother was ill, and I nursed her, and she died. And literally the day after my mother's funeral, and this, it's very meaningful for me too, how I entered Lorne world. My college friend Tom Gamble, who was an SNL writer from the first 5 seasons, said, "Hey, we're going to start a new show. Lauren Michaels, come into the office tomorrow. Maybe there's a job for you." So he literally picked me up at my house. I was kind of a wreck, and I go to Broadway Video, meet Jim Downey, George Meyer, Lorne, all these people, and I don't know why they offered me a job, being the writer's assistant. And I don't think I did very much except order a lot of food from the Carnegie Deli for these people for, around the clock. But yeah, so I was there, and it was, I realize in hindsight that it was kind of a privileged perch to see Lorne presiding over something that went terribly wrong.
Yes.
Which didn't happen much.
It's really an exceptional misstep in his long rise to the top.
But he, it was a smaller staff than SNL was, and he liked me and tried to get me to stay even after the show was canceled very, very quickly. So I think when I popped up again, that meant something to him. He was also interested to learn during that coronary meeting in his office, because he never knew this about me, that when I was 15 or 16, I had been in the audience at one of the shows of the very first season, the show when Elliot Gould hosted. Because I was a high school kid in Connecticut, I took the commuter train in with a friend who had gotten tickets through a relative, and it was so thrilling to be there. And I'm sure I didn't get any of the jokes. I was too young and suburban, but the excitement of the camera swooping around and the breaking of the fourth wall, it really affected me. And Lorne told me that was the show, that Elliot Gould show, that when he really felt that the show was working, like he really thought, okay, I have something here. And I think the fact that I had been there, there was a kind of kismet to him.
Oh yeah. So you saw what not many people often speak of the sentimental side, which because they don't get to even hear from him, because he is kind of surrounded by a group of people that keep him up, like the Lornettes, and you were. Did you call yourself a munchkin?
Well, I just meant I was.
That wasn't a formal term, though.
No, that wasn't a formal term.
Okay.
No, that would be worse than Lornette, I think.
Yeah. But yeah, and then Lornette. Who knows what that term actually could mean? It's usually it's affectionately.
Oh my goodness, we have a.
What's happening?
Being upstaged here. Hello.
Oh, I see. It's okay.
I got the wrong address. If you want me to come up and tell a little story later,
Okay.
We
Actually,
will.
Let's do it now. No, yeah, because an entrance like that deserves.
Bruce
This is Bruce McCullough from the Kids in the Hall.
Source extraordinaire, I can tell you.
Would you like my
Source
microphone?
Extraordinaire.
Would you like my microphone? Can I just say before we do this, I did an interview with CBC Radio when we were promoting the book Kids in the Hall, One Dumb Guy, which is a phrase I got from him. And I was trying to be funny, and you said to me, the greatest advice I've ever heard is, Paul, don't try to be funny. So thank you. Thank you for slitting me then, and here you go.
Yes. I am going to try to be funny, though. I had an interview recently, and the guy said, are you funny all the time? I said, I'm literally funny all the time. Although I didn't look so funny when I was trying to find this place. Would you like me to tell Lauren's story? Do you have a question for me, either of you? We can share this.
Okay, so first I would ask him, when was the first time you actually spoke to Lorne, and was it at the Rivoli, or where did you speak to Lorne first?
It was at the Squeeze Club, and I'm not saying that there was cocaine involved, but it was.
They got you a mic. That's good. Now you don't have to use the Paul mic.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, tell you. So you met up at the Squeeze Club,
Yeah, and he was...
which is Marcus O'Hara's club, by
well,
the way.
he
It's a great
actually,
place.
we had it, and I think you talk about it in the book. I haven't gotten to the Kids in the Hall part yet, because I think that'd be too ghoulish. It's an excellent book, but I'm a very slow reader and very busy. No, he actually, I wrote for Saturday Night Live with Mark McKinney the year that Lorne was back, what they call the weird year. And he just met me there, and he was really nice. I was the only guy who ever yelled at Lorne in a control room. But I didn't see him until after we had done our season. And he came up to see us, and we famously did like a 3-hour showcase, because every comedian in town wanted to meet him and to get on to Saturday Night Live. And so we did this terrible 3-hour showcase. And afterwards, he actually phoned me, because for some reason, I'm the guy who works, you know that, Paul?
Yes.
In the troupe, Kids in the Hall, oh my God, they're the worst.
He's the beating
They
heart
are
of the
worst.
Kids in the Hall.
And he kind of said, like, you know, do you want to come back to Saturday Night Live? You know, Dave's pretty good too. We might come.
Best Lorne.
And no, it's not good. And he said, or, you know, we can do our own show. I said, let's do our own show. And I told Dave it didn't make him too happy. So that's when I first met Lorne.
Okay. And
I remember
you have
Bruce, one of the things that Bruce told me about their deepening understanding of who Lorne was and how mogul-y he was compared to all the Canadians they knew, is that you were watching football at his apartment in New York and were shocked that there was a urinal in the washroom.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I didn't get it at first, because I was a little punk, right? I was a little asshole. And I remember when Lorne wanted to fly me. I ended up doing a film for him called Superstar, which you may or may not know, the Molly Shannon film. But he wanted to fly me to London to meet him. Just have a meeting, you know. And my dad, my bastard of a dad, was still alive then. Boozer and a salesman in equal amounts. But I talked to Lorne. I said, no, I'm going to go to Greece with my girlfriend. And he went, you go see that important man. So, like, I didn't know that I was supposed to understand his power then. And I will tell you quickly, and then I will be off the stage, because I want my queen and my king here to shine and not have a little jester here. When I yelled at Lorne, I was the only one I ever seen yell at Lorne. It was, and you probably know how the show works, is if you're a writer, you get to pick everything. I don't know why he does that. So you're invested. So I wrote a scene with Pee Wee Herman and Joan Cusack. And he played a kid, and he had a crush on the teacher, and he sent her a note and a picture and stuff. And she says, oh, that's so sweet. Of course, I'm a pretty lady. Of course, you like me. And then there's a turn on the scene, and I don't think they would do it now. So she says, like, she was kind of saying how people can break your hearts and how people can be horrible. And so, do you like me or do you love me? So it sort of turns into kind of a, you know, Pee Wee was playing a child, sort of turns pedo a little bit, but they let us do it. But anyway, I had dressed her in like really marmy stuff. And Lorne, you know, you watch the sketches during the show, you know, in the control room with him if you've had a sketch, and he says, you know, put her in something, you know, a little sexier. I don't like what she's wearing. And I said, I don't know why I did this. I said, why don't I put her in a fucking bikini, Lorne?
Wow.
You knew me then. It's like, I should have been fired. I should have been fired. And it was in a control room filled with people. Thank you so much.
I'm sure
I love.
Oh, that's great. That's a really
Thank
great
you,
story.
Bruce.
I'm going to drop the mic.
That is such a great story.
Bruce McCullough, ladies and gentlemen.
And I have to say, I'm sure Lorne liked it, and I actually used that story in my book to illustrate one of the many fun things about writing about Lorne. Every journalist likes it when people have like rules. You know, it's really nice to be able to break some complex subject down in terms of rules and regulations.
Yeah.
And the kids, Mark McKinney in particular, introduced me to, I mean, Mark always called Lorne's pronouncements Coens, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Like mysterious Coens. But the one that illustrated, that story, was one of Lorne's comedy precepts, which is do it in sunshine. And what he means by that is even when you're doing satire, or, when you're doing comedy, you can't lose sight of the fact that it's meant to be an entertainment. You want the colors to be bright. You want the girls to be pretty. You would rather her be in a nice dress than wearing some fuzzy gray thing. And another great illustration of that is how he told me that if you look at movie posters for most of the movies that Lorne has produced, or most of the successful ones. Brain Candy is one among these, and Wayne's World. They are all against a background of a blue sky with bright sunshine and white clouds. You want people to look at it and think, that looks like fun. And I remember when he was telling me this story, he said, and this is a great American value. It's why he loved Hollywood when he lived there. He said, you don't think of Germans saying, like, that looks like fun. It's this American value that he wants to foster.
May I add one thing, Queen, and then I will trundle away, a word I don't get to use enough. Now that I'm in the library, I should use the word trundle all I can. He had a couple things, and my wife actually said, of 30 years, you quote Lorne more than anyone you've ever quoted. I quote him all the time. Yeah. But just to add on to your thing, he said, have fun, always have fun, but also, and we probably break this rule all the time in the Kids in the Hall, don't get caught trying to be funny. Don't try too hard. And I think that's what that means. Don't try too hard. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Bruce
McCullough.
McCullough.
Thank you, Bruce.
That's awesome. And I love this because it makes my job so much easier. I don't have to ask any more questions. But one of the things that he just said there was, and you both touched on it, was I love this idea, and Mulaney talks about it in your book, which I love the book, by the way. I don't know if I said that.
Thanks.
I know a lot of the story.
He's an insider.
But this is stuff, minutia, and wonderful stories that are, and it's not boring ever, and it's all like Bruce was just saying.
That's a great blurb.
Not boring.
Boring ever. Paul Myers.
It's 100% not boring. No, but what Bruce was also alluding to, too, is he's so eminently quotable, but the people around him are eminently quotable. And what was my point? I don't know. My point was that, you talk about him giving the power. Bruce was just mentioning it.
Oh, yes.
Very important. When you
yeah.
get a sketch, like, he's not just a producer, he's an editor of a magazine.
Right.
But he lets everyone sub-edit to some degree,
right.
and they become the producer of their own segment.
Well,
that to me it's a school for teaching people how to produce themselves.
Yes, and two things there. One thing I'll just say really quickly, because I could talk about it all night, is I think that one of the reasons we developed the rapport that we did over all these years, and why our conversations were so easy and interesting, is that we kind of, and I don't mean at all to be elevating myself here, I'm nowhere near anything on Lawrence level, but my day job and his day job have things in common. We have a weekly deadline at the New Yorker. He has a weekly deadline at the show. We're both dealing with these armies of needy, nutty, talented egos who need to be reined in. We have to say no 25 times a day and yet keep them enthused and encouraged. And we actually had a lot to talk to each other about just in terms of that. But then to get back to what you were just saying about empowering the writers, one of my favorite things about writing about Lorne's life is, you're a biographer, so we're going to talk about this off stage. But the most interesting part of the work is when you're learning about what your subject did before he walked onto the world stage.
Yes.
Sort of what are all the different things that happened to him that made him into who he became. And the fascinating thing about Lorne's life pre-SNL, I almost felt like he was a character out of Dickens or something, and that every single thing that happened to him, every little bit of adversity he encountered, you can draw like a direct line between that and some producing skill that he picked up. And that was interesting because producing itself is such a nebulous, vague art. It's hard to even say what it is. But to go back to this example of the writers, one of Lorne's early jobs in Hollywood before SNL, and he mostly had a miserable time out there. He worked on cruddy shows hosted by people like Perry Como, and at one point he told me he was so broke that his little sister Barbara, who is here tonight, I'm pleased to say,
We just met her.
loaned him money from her paper route. to stay afloat. So anyway, so he was working, thank you, Barbara. So he was working at Laugh-In, which was a big hit show on NBC. And he said to himself, I should be happy. I'm on a hit show. But it was a miserable experience, and here's why. The writers of that show worked out of a motel miles away from the studio. That's right, yeah. They never went to the set. They've never met the actors and all the glamorous movie stars who came through. They had no connection to what actually happened in the show. Their jokes went into this maw and were rewritten and rewritten again. And Lorne told me the only way you knew if you even got anything on the air was to sit in the motel room with your fellow writers when it was on and see. So he vowed right then that if he ever had a show, because he was starting to percolate ideas for having his own variety show, he would put the writers at the center of the action. And that the writers, instead of being, pesky people on the side, would really do everything. And I often say that it's as if, there's an old Hollywood joke about the starlet who was so stupid that she slept with the screenwriter, And I think Lorne's project was to kind of turn that upside down. So at SNL, the writers, they're almost more important than the performers, who are the names and faces that we know. And what happens when you write a sketch at SNL and it gets picked, you, as Bruce was saying, you're responsible for the costume choices. You help pick the scenic design. You direct the sketch. You're responsible for it all the way to the end. And this is why, this is because of Lorne's own wounded, pride and trauma at being sidelined at Laugh-In. But the most interesting thing about it is that it explains why SNL is this incubator for showrunners and directors. Without SNL, you wouldn't have Tina Fey and Amy Poehler creating Parks and Rec and 30 Rock and all the writers.
Fred Armisen.
And all the Simpsons writers.
Amazing, yeah.
All of these, Greg Daniels, all these people. George Meyer, who have gone on, and because they have not just this sort of comedic talent to know how to write funny, but they have the executive functioning thing that they've learned from doing that. And most comedy writers, I can tell you, are not great on executive functioning. Wouldn't you say so?
Well, yeah, no, it's.
But Lorne trains them.
It's a school for, obviously not to give away my brother's things, but he came from Second City. Yeah. Second City trained a lot of these people, and they learned how to write first, and sometimes write on their feet, and then learn how to type up those things.
Yeah.
And then they get to Lorne, and that's when and the kids in the hall tell about this too, which is, you just get it slapped into you that how to do TV for the Midwest of the United States. That's Lorne's mythical viewer is out there somewhere.
Yeah.
I'm sure he doesn't go there.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm not putting words in his mouth. But the idea is he has this idea that if it's too hip for the house,
right?
But he teaches that, and that's what I see in Mulaney and I see in Hader and all those people.
No, it's not unrelated to the Do It in Sunshine, because one problem that he has sometimes with very young writers is that they want it to be gritty and indie, like the kind of person who wants to make a black and white film, I love black and white films,
and yet Tom Schiller came out of that system,
right? But I know what he means. One of his other mantras is "We're on in all 50 states."
Yes.
And what he means about that, for that, you don't want to write something that's only going to be for hipsters or only going to be for cool college students. And another thing he's kind of sentimental about is even just the concept of broadcast, and he likes to compare broadcast television to the way the railroads united America during the 19th century. They were something that kind of pulled all these disparate states and people together. And right now, besides the Super Bowl, I think SNL is one of the only things that just kind of everybody watches. They don't watch it at 11:30 on Saturday night, but it still has that ability that, your grandmother might watch it, your niece might, all kinds of people watch it.
That's something you talk about in the book too, which is SNL, because you just alluded to the fact that people now don't necessarily watch SNL when it airs, and they don't necessarily watch all of it. Virality and the modern age of YouTube and maybe even TikTok versions of the sketches sketch comedy, the way that they produce these segments, they are by nature easily to pop apart into viral segments. And so many things like the digital shorts
Right.
Of The Lonely Island, and later Please Don't Destroy, they have a viral element that comes out of the fact that those segments are auteured, if you will.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, the show has been kind of exceptionally on top of changing technology, considering it's 50 years old. You know, it started with those little Albert Brooks films, and then the Schiller reels,
the Schiller's reel.
and then you know the Lonely Island things, and it is amazing that it's still this broadcast show on at 11:30, and yet, I mean, as Amy Poehler put it, she said, you know, SNL, the show that my parents used to watch while they were having sex, now I watch on my computer at my desk at work. You know, I mean, it does sort of lend itself.
Yeah.
Or you watch it in the subway on your phone. You know, you can watch it anywhere.
Something else I think is great about your book too is you chose a couple of things to focus on, to keep coming back to. I think it's the Jonah Hill week, and this is a running sort of theme, and we go time traveling back and forth, but we constantly keep coming back to, you know, the week, and you chose that week. Maybe there's another week in there, but mostly I hear the Jonah Hill one coming back all the time.
It's mainly that week, and here's how that happened. So as I said, I hadn't been a writer before. You know, I mean, I'd edited a lot of writers,
Could have fooled me.
rewritten a lot of writers.
Yeah.
But after I had been talking with Lorne for a few years, I began to think, okay, this book starts in 1944 in Toronto. You know, cold, slushy, post-war kind of. I thought this could be kind of a drag, you know, and I knew that I wanted to make my readers understand at the very beginning just what the kind of force of personality that Lorne has, and understand the kind of strange Hunger Games-ish sort of vibe at the show itself. So I think it also, because of my background as a magazine editor, you know, I'm always telling my writers to put into their stories scenes where you're in the room with a person, you know, and you see what they're wearing and eating and talking like, and you're there, you know, there's a fly on the wall element. So I knew I wanted that in my book. So again, Lorne, so helpful and cooperative. I said to him, you know, it'd be really great if I could just embed at the show for one whole week and just stay at your elbow and watch everything as it unfolds. And to my shock, he agreed, and he let me do that.
Nobody gets to do that usually.
And yeah, and so it gave me the idea of an unusual structure for the book. I learned later that there's a name for it, and it's called a braided narrative. So the first chapter of the book is Monday at the show, when all the writers are meeting with Jonah Hill for the first time. Then you cut back to, you know, 1940s Toronto and Lorne watching Sid Caesar on TV, and then Tuesday, and it goes through the whole book that way. So it kind of propels you to the end, and it ended up being a really effective device because you see the tension build. You see each day of the show has its own character. By Wednesday, things are getting pretty tense. You know, the writers have stayed up all night Tuesday writing the sketches, but by Saturday, it's like, you know, it's like Game of Thrones. I mean, it's just off, the tension is off the charts.
Yeah.
And people describe, and I take this as a compliment, reading the Saturday chapter when it's all coming together and having their, you know, heart beating, because it gets so stressful. And I was also lucky. It was a very interesting week to be there. All kinds of weird stuff happened. Alec Baldwin got arrested that week, and luckily for me, it wasn't the arrest having to do with a gun, which would not have been comically so great, but it was an arrest for punching a guy over a parking space. You know, so I got to see.
Who hasn't been there?
I got to see, you know, and then I got to see, you know, Tina Fey walking in and bitching about Alec, and Lorne was hilarious about it. So anyway, it brings the reader into the process. So
it's amazingly candid also, in that, you know, I never thought I would ever hear what people like Tina was saying about Alec, but, you know, because they obviously did 30 Rock and were so great on that. They had such a chemistry. A Lorne-ish character, let's be honest. I mean, Jack Donaghy.
Oh, yeah.
I love that Jack Donaghy, by the way, embodies also the GE microwave division thing.
Right.
Like, that is just, anyway, that's Tina.
No, there's so much stuff there's a lot of Jack Donahue that comes right from Lorne. Like there's one of my
Yeah.
favorite 30 Rock lines is the Tina Fey character comes in and sees him in a tuxedo.
Yeah.
And she says, "Where are you going?" And he said, "It's after 6. What am I, a farmer?"
Yeah.
You know?
That's-
And Alec Baldwin told me, he always describes Lorne as a guy who keeps a tuxedo in his glove compartment. you know?
Yes. Yes.
But this goes back to something that you were referring to earlier about, you said, talked about maybe, kissing the ring, the Godfather kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think one of Lorne's biggest achievements is, there is something in a non-pernicious way about the whole enterprise that does remind you of the Godfather. It's like he's built this whole culture. It's a family. You're in the family.
Yeah.
And when you're in the family, you stay in the family. And you're in, all these people are in each other's shows. They
Yeah.
move in and out of each other's orbit, kind of like a big, happy, and sometimes neurotic and unhappy family.
No, and I've seen it. I've seen it where, Mike and Fred Armisen, my brother Mike and Fred Armisen, they were never in the same cast, but they've done shows together in Cabaret in New York and stuff, and they immediately understood because, and Fred, by the way, is one of those guys who, he is so proud as hell to have been in the Lorne story, and he obviously shines in that environment, but it's really beautiful to see how grateful he feels to be in part of that number of all those people that came before. And that's that family thing you're talking about.
Yes. No, Fred told me, he really gets overcome with emotion when he talks about it. He said that when he meets an SNL person for the first time, maybe somebody decades before him, he said he almost recognizes something in their voices. He thinks that there's, the way the Andrews sisters or sister acts or brothers have this kind of
blood harmony. Yeah, yeah.
He thinks there's something that ties all the SNL people together
Absolutely.
in a mystical way.
We've been sort of talking about Godfather themes a little bit, and one of the things that comes up in your book is, and it's a morbid topic, but it's the succession plan. We're just even talking about him just leaving the show.
Yeah.
And there's several candidates have come up from Seth Meyers, Tina Fey is a favorite.
Colin Jost.
Yeah. Oh, Colin Jost, yes,
His
of
name
course.
comes
Very
up, yeah.
practical, very much like a Seth Meyers character in terms of offstage runs a lot of things that you don't even see on camera.
Right.
And then there's also people like Steve Higgins, who is not a famous person outside generally. People who watch the show know who Steve Higgins is, but he knows he's the Lorne Whisperer, right?
Yes.
So, but who do you think, if you have a favorite, you think is the most reasonable succession?
Well, I don't have a favorite, but I do have a theory, and
Okay.
I hope that NBC listens to me because I think it's a very good plan. The thing about Lorne, the thing that makes Lorne irreplaceable, it's not just his. Well, first, it's his taste. It's his ability to be able to kind of, in the book I call it like see the hinges between eras. He can always figure out what's next.
The hinge thing, yeah.
The gravitas, the fact that all the suits, all the money people are in awe of him. He can protect the show. He can keep the budget what it is and everything. But so I think he, as an entity, as a person, is irreplaceable. The show would not work without him. But I think there's a way that it could go on. And here's what it is. One of the pleasures of writing my book was to be able to shine a light on and give credit to so many of these really brilliant producers whose names nobody knows. He has this squad of lieutenants, Steve Higgins, Eric Kenward,
Shoemaker.
Mike Shoemaker. No, well, he's at Seth. I'm talking about just at the show.
Oh, at the show.
Aaron Doyle, Carolyn Maroney, who really run the day-to-day of SNL. And each of them embodies a slightly different facet of Lorne,
Yes.
and they're really competent people, and they know what he's thinking. They know what he likes, and I think, I don't think Lorne is going anywhere. I don't think he wants to leave. The show is his whole life. He's never missed an episode of SNL. He's never had the stomach flu or stubbed his toe. He's always there.
It's kind of amazing.
It's over 50 years, except for the 5 when he took a hiatus. But so here's my idea. From spending as much time there as I did, I realized that Lorne's superpower is really needed just at 2 critical moments during the week. Wednesday, they do a read-through of like 40 sketches with all the cast. And then they're winnowed down to like 12 that go into production. And he sits in the read-through, he reads the stage direction, he pays careful attention to what's getting laughs, and then with his deputies, they'll pick the sketches afterward. And then the second time when his intelligence is critical is Saturday, the dress rehearsal and the meeting right after dress rehearsal. He sits under the audience in this little kind of, I don't know, lean-to, and watches the dress rehearsal, makes all of these decisions about it, and then makes a lot of changes between dress and air, and that really affects what you see on the show. And so my notion would be that, you know, even for the next 10 years, you know, however infirm or tired or whatever he gets, if he could just come in for a couple of hours on Wednesday and a couple of hours on Saturday, it would still totally be his show, and those other deputies would be able to do the day-to-day running of things.
Yes, he's basically trained the people to do all the legwork that is under his purview. Yeah, yeah.
And one other thing I want to say, just because it's a really fun part of the Saturday part of the book, and it was so cool to see it, is that Saturday moment when he's watching the dress rehearsal and making notes, and then he goes up this little staircase to his office where he has a meeting with everybody, and he's firing off, you know, he's firing off directives. I mean, all week he's pretty mellow before that, and he's asking every single person in the room their opinion all the time. Like, he really listens to what the 24-year-olds say. He really listens to what everybody says. But at that moment, at about 10 o'clock on Saturday, it's like this kind of total personality change. Do you guys watch the Apple TV show Severance here? Do you get that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, when he goes up that staircase, I realized it's like he's in the Severance elevator, okay? He comes out at the top, he's like, and he's this whole different guy who's kind of barking orders. This goes first, that goes, you know, cut 10 minutes from this, change this line, get rid of that wig, you know, and it's amazing to see. And Paul McCartney told me that he likes to come to the show just to watch Lorne in that meeting because it's so intense.
That's a whole other conversation, by the way. Like, Paul McCartney's opinion of Lorne Michaels, and it's a whole
fun.
other thing. It's maybe a follow-up.